Roy, Ranking Member Scanlon, and honorable members of this committee, thank you for entertaining this important discussion today and allowing me to share our story with you. I'd like to speak to you about the DOJ's Project 2022 that happened October 5th at 7 a.m. in the morning when my house was assaulted, my wife and children were terrorized, and I was kidnapped at gunpoint by 4 armed men. I had just sent 3 of my children to the car so I could take them to school when the house began to shake from a loud banging near the front door. I heard men shouting on my porch, "Open up, FBI." The banging continued. As I looked out a side window to check the location of my children, I saw 2 unmarked SUVs with lights flashing, but I did not see my children. The banging continued and I heard more shouting. I opened the curtains on the front door to find 3 men with guns trained on the door. I asked who they were looking for and they replied, "We're here for you." They did not identify me or provide identification for themselves. As I believed there was an imminent threat to the safety of my wife and 7 children who were home that day, I determined to surrender myself to them, hoping that they were legitimate law enforcement. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch, staring down the barrels of both a pistol and an automatic weapon pointed at my head. As I did, I asked what authority they were operating under and if they had any identification. I later learned at the same time 3 of my children, ages 12, 14, and 18, were being detained in the side yard on the edge of the woods by a 4th armed man. I was taken without the presentation of a warrant or identification when requested. Make no mistake, this was an armed conflict and I was unarmed. Lethal force was abused and to abridge my God-given and constitutionally secured rights. At the moment of being placed in handcuffs, I became a slave to ideological tyrants, either the ones holding the weapons or the ones they obeyed. The event that brought this ill-fated drama to my front door took place 18 months prior, as has been noted. Pro-life Christians gathered at care from abortion clinics in Mount Juliet to attempt to save unborn children that were scheduled to die that morning. Of the couple hundred people who attended that day, 8 adults were in fact arrested for nonviolently sitting at abortion clinic doors. For doing a sit-in like many of you have seen right here in your own buildings, Antifa and BLM and Hamas. I wonder how many of those have faced 10 years of prison for those activities. But the fact remains that I did not do any of these things. I did nothing that was outside constitutionally protected free speech and religious freedom. I did nothing that day that I've not done many times since FACE was passed in 1994. I did not sit in, I broke no laws, federal or local, and I was not arrested the day of the event. But yes, Member Scanlon, I did pray that day. I had talked with the police chief and lead negotiating team. I helped the police and the pro-lifers by messaging back and forth. The police spokesperson complimented us on the peacefulness nature of the event on the evening news. The lead negotiator testified for us in our federal trial. There's a lot of talk about violence around the issue of abortion. Of course, all people of honor and character denounce acts of violence on either side of this issue. But the narrative has been projected against the pro-life people and fails to take into account at least 3 other aspects of violence around this issue. There is violence committed against every unborn child in every abortion. There's violence committed by aggravated fathers or other family members of aborted children. And there's violence being done to pro-lifers by our own government. Any serious conversation about violence going forward needs to include these 3 facts. The FACE Act was ostensibly passed because of violence, but as my family knows very well, all it did was give violence the cover of law and place it in the hands of the government. The phrase, "the process is the punishment," and the weaponization of the FACE Act are not just words in our household. We are living the reality of those words. Since my arrest, I've been restricted to the Middle District of Tennessee for over 2 years under control and supervision of the federal government. My family spent 20 months of having a potential decade in prison hanging over their lead provider's head, my head. We endured long, stressful days of the actual trial, enduring lies and half-truths for the sake of government winning a case with no regards to actually seeking justice. The process has entailed government agents invading and inspecting our home, calling my home to make sure I'm obeying the rules. It involved giving up my rights as a U.S. citizen in spite of the novel use of the 1800 conspiracies laws. The appeal court refused to stay the order pending the appeal to find out if this was a legal right or application of the law. All this process is a punishment, and I was the one that did not get jail time. There are those who are in jail today while we are discussing this abuse, some of them for over a year at this point. With the overturning of Roe and the long train of abuses, the unequal application of the FACE Act, there is no legitimate reason for it to remain on the books. It is a tool whose sole purpose is to stifle free speech and abuse the rights of Christian conservatives. There is nothing that the FACE Act does that is not already accomplished by state laws across the land. If abortion is returned to the states, so should the laws governing it.